Defendant Jordan Palmer is claiming self-defense after he fatally shot his neighbor on April 19th of 2024. Now, Palmer claims that he was putting a piece of mail that he found on the ground back in a mailbox when his neighbor, Stephen Campbell, accused him of stealing and began attacking him. However, prosecutors say security footage contradicts Palmer's claim and actually shows him firing at Campbell before Campbell made any movement toward him. Well, today, before testimony resumed, the defense argued for a dismissal, claiming that the state made a late attempt to introduce new police photos of Palmer as evidence that the defense wasn't aware of until last week. The judge ruled that the photos could not be allowed or would not be allowed in, but he did say that the officer who took them could testify about what he saw. Let's go back inside that courtroom now. On the stand is actually a defense witness who's actually been called out of order, Andrew Wade. He's a toxicologist for the Montana State Crime Lab.
Yes. Based on your training experience, do you have an understanding of the effects of other drugs?
Yes.
And Mr. Wade, how do you become involved in this case, the case of Jordan Palmer?
I tested the alcohol for this case.
And when you say you tested the alcohol for this case, whose blood were you testing?
So we assign everything as a case number when it comes into the lab. And this case number that I tested was 24-002715.
And then would it, does it align with your memory that the subject of the testing was named Stephen Campbell?
I did review the chain of custody beforehand in the submission forms, and that FSD number does associate with Stephen Campbell.
Who contacted you to perform this testing?
This was a submission from the medical examiner's office, the state of Montana's ME's office.
And is that the person who generally would handle performing the autopsy?
That's correct.
What type of blood samples did you receive in this case?
I don't have, do you mind if I refer to my notes?
If you're not, are you, I guess first to lay the foundation for that, are you able to remember what substance you test?
Generically, it was blood and vitreous is what I performed. I do know that there were other blood submissions involved.
Would it be helpful to refresh your memory to look at your notes?
That would be nice, yes.
Or to look at the toxicology report?
The report, yes.
So I'll just give you a moment to do that, and then I'll ask that you flip it over and then answer the question without it.
Yeah, so this submission, they submitted hospital tubes, which sometimes if the decedent had been admitted to the hospital, the ME's office will go ahead and sequester those tubes, and then they'll also perform their own autopsy sample draws. So in this case, we did receive some hospital tubes. Then we also received the autopsy draws, which included blood, vitreous, and urine.
And what does the word vitreous mean?
Vitreous is the solution that is behind your eye. It's contained within your eyeball.
What type of test did you perform on the hospital blood?
The hospital blood, we performed alcohol analysis.
What was the outcome of that test?
On this test, I found the blood within the alcohol alcohol within the blood tube to be at 0.301 grams per 100 milliliters of ethanol.
Does that mean that when Stephen Campbell was at the hospital, his blood alcohol content would have been 0.3 BAC, or walk me through what that means?
That is at the time of the draw. That is at the time the blood was drawn, it was 0.301 grams per 100 milliliters BAC.
Is a 0.301 a high or low blood alcohol content?
High.
And I also want to ask you about what test you performed on the autopsy blood or the femoral blood.
For alcohol analysis, I did not perform any alcohol analysis. I do believe that drug testing was performed on the autopsy blood.
Do you remember if any drugs were identified from that testing?
I do. It was 7-aminoclonazepam, which is a metabolite of the parent drug clonazepam, and also duloxetine, which is the generic for the drug Cymbalta. And I believe ketamine was also detected.
And did you perform any test on the vitreous?
I did. I did the alcohol analysis on the vitreous as well.
What was the result of that test?
May I refer to the report again?
Would it refresh your recollection if you looked at the report?
Yes, it would.
Yes.
The results of the vitreous testing were 0.270 grams per 100 milliliters of ethanol in the vitreous.
Why is the number different for vitreous than for hospital blood? What does that mean?
There's multiple reasons. So generally, when you have a hospital blood drawn, it's taken right at the admission, and there could be time while you're still metabolizing before you pass away and the autopsy is performed. Even though you can still be metabolizing while you're in the hospital. In fact, once you're hooked up to an IV, you tend to flush out a little bit quicker. So that is generally one way that a discrepancy between the two can occur, but also vitreous itself, the pharmacokinetic, how it's absorbed into the body isn't exactly the same as it is in the blood.
Which of those two numbers, the 0.3 of the hospital blood or the 0.27 of the vitreous, would more accurately reflect what Mr. Campbell's BAC was at before he went to the hospital?
That depends on a couple of factors. So one of the reasons that our standard operating procedures have us take the vitreous sample, if there was a traumatic incident that occurred before death, for example, if you had a shot in the stomach, but you had just drank 3 beers or a half of thing of vodka, that can cause rapid exposure to the other blood samples that can occur. So the vitreous, as it's kind of sequestered from the rest of the body, depending on the amount of trauma, it can go either way. The vitreous could potentially be a better example at the time of death, depending on the trauma. There's some factors that go into that.
Is a 0.27 a high or low blood alcohol content?
High.
Are you familiar from your experience working these cases with what the legal limit is for driving?
Yes, 0.08 grams per 100 milliliters.
So is it fair to say that this is over 3 or 4 times the legal limit for driving?
Yes, it's well over.
And did you prepare a report with these findings in this case?
I did.
Do you have the chance to review that report before testifying today?
I did.
Is that report called Toxicology Report with the lab case number FSD 24002715?
That's correct.
And I'm going to hold it up. It's probably going to be hard for you to see it, but this is the toxicology report for lab case number FSD 24002715 for subject Stephen Campbell. Would this be an accurate reflection of your report in the case?
Correct.
And Your Honor, I now move to admit the item pre-marked as Defense Exhibit G into evidence.
Ms. Foley, Mr. Bowen?
No objection.
What was the number again, Ms. Brosowski?
It's Exhibit G, and I can provide a copy to the court if it would be helpful.
Yes, Defendant's Exhibit G is admitted.
And may I publish to the jury?
You may.
All right, so the jury is hearing from a defense witness called out of order, a toxicologist, and your testimony that the blood alcohol level of this victim was almost or more than 3 times the legal limit. All right, coming up next on Court TV, more testimony from that defense expert in the return mail murder trial of Jordan Palmer. Plus, a jury is seated in the murder retrial of a Florida woman accused of telling her son to murder the mother of his child. Sheila Agee gets ready to face a jury a second time after a mistrial was declared last year. We're going to revisit the reasons why after the break, so keep it here on your front row seat to justice.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, an abandoned baby and 4 family members found dead. We'll bring you the latest as the search for a suspected killer continues.
Closing Arguments with Vinny Politan, tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
Saturday nights on ION
is our night.
Let's go! Double headers every Saturday at 7 and 10 p.m. Eastern. The new Saturday Night Out is on ION all season long.
Kind of, yeah. I was definitely intimidated. Intimidated. Because he was pretty scared for your life. He was pretty big and very aggressive and I wasn't thinking, yeah.
That was a phone call between defendant Jordan Palmer and his mother while he was in custody after fatally shooting his neighbor, Stephen Campbell. Palmer claims it was self-defense. We're watching day 4 of the return mail murder trial in Montana. Joining us to discuss is former federal prosecutor and president of West Coast Trial Lawyers, Nima Rahmani. Nima, great to see you. As always, thanks so much for joining me. Now, I'm telling you, now, today, things are really getting interesting, right? And I say that because, again, we have to remember the burden is on the prosecution to prove that this was not self-defense beyond a reasonable doubt. Here's what we learned today. We're learning that he was angry, had been arguing with his girlfriend all day, and said some really mean things via text and on the phone. He was a large guy, stout, as she described him, right? And right now, we're finding out that he was beyond drunk. He was very drunk. And he had drugs in his system that probably mixed not too well with all that alcohol. You put that all into a hat, you may find a juror or two who are not willing to believe that there's enough evidence that perhaps there wasn't some aggression that we didn't see on the video.
Michael, you're absolutely right. And the most difficult cases to predict on court TV are always self-defense cases. We've seen a lot of hung juries, even outright acquittals in these cases, which you don't typically see in a murder case. And like you said, whenever the defense can dirty up the victim, they've scored points. And you're talking about a blood alcohol content of 0.3. I mean, that's very significant. You know, most states have a 0.08 legal limit. So here's someone that's 3 or 4 times the legal limit. Obviously, it's not unlawful to be drinking and severely intoxicated in your own home, but everyone knows that 0.08 limit. And then now you're talking about illegal drugs like ketamine, which of course killed Matthew Perry, as well as prescription drugs like anti-anxiety medication. I think this is all very helpful. And typically, of course, this evidence doesn't come in until the defense starts its case in chief, but they have an expert going out of order. So if you're the prosecution, in the middle of your case, you have this witness who's testifying pretty effectively for the defense. So this is a big problem for the state here.
Yeah, and again, sometimes going out of order as a defense attorney, you don't like it. I think it's absolutely, and tell me, it sounds like you agree with me, it's been a little bit of an advantage. It's the second time that they're doing it, sort of interrupting the state's case with information that I think is fairly helpful to their case, which could change the way a juror sees the case.
Absolutely. If you're the prosecution, by the time you even get to the defense's case, you want to have overwhelmed them such that, not to say the jurors aren't paying attention, but they've already made up their minds, even though they're supposed to keep an open mind. Well, now you're getting witnesses out of order. And look, these are experts and they may be retained in other cases. And, you know, the last thing judges like to do is to keep jurors waiting. So I'm not saying this is gamesmanship, but whatever the reason, this helps the defense because this is a key witness, a critical one that's testifying early, because we've said it time and time again. It's really that primacy, that recency, and the prosecution certainly does have that burden, but they get the advantage of going first. And then during closing arguments, they get to go last. So some of that advantage is being taken away here.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, Nima, stand by. Want to get folks back inside the courtroom now for more of the toxicologist testimony. He's on direct. And again, he's an expert witness for the defense that was called out of order. Andrew Wade is discussing what substances were found inside the victim, including his very high blood alcohol content level.
Now, Mr. Wade, how could a 0.27 or 0.3 blood alcohol content affect someone's demeanor based on your training experience?
Yeah, so there's plenty of studies that even at a 0.05, you start affecting your frontal cortex, your frontal lobe, and that's in charge of your decision making and emotions. So those tend to compound the more and more a person drinks. So at a 0.3, you're at a pre-debilitated in your frontal cortex. A loss of emotional control, definitely exaggerated emotions, definitely loss of motor skills. So you're gonna start seeing things that are amplified at around a 0.08. Walking should be fairly difficult. I would say most people are on the verge of passing out, and you're not creating memories anymore, so you're in that blackout stage. And then even at a 0.3, you're also starting to lose some of the functions that your hindbrain starts to also be affected, and that's in control of your respiratory function and your temperature regulation. So your brain's pretty well affected at a 0.3.
So I want to go through some of those particular effects. So the first one you mentioned, was it a loss of your ability to think or reason? Can you describe that more?
Yeah, so you're not thinking with your normal thinking capacity, so you could be set off by small things, and it goes either way. I mean, a lot of people at a 0.3, you're hyper emotional, so that's why a lot of times you can see people crying for no reason or angry for no reason, or those emotions just become, you're not voluntarily shutting those down. You're not checking yourself, which occurs on a normal basis. So those tend to get a little bit exaggerated.
So you mentioned that you could be angry for no reason with a 0.3 BAC. Is that fairly common?
Correct, yes. Aggressions can definitely be elevated.
And then you mentioned that sometimes people might not be able to walk. If somebody is still able to walk, why might that be, and what might their demeanor be like then? Let me know if that's too broad of a question.
I think I understand what you're asking. So the more and more somebody drinks, like we're talking on a daily basis, those things that are occurring in your brain happen. You can get what's called like a learned bias. You can learn how to kind of stay near a wall and walk, and your body sorts of tends to learn ways to deal with the debilitation that is occurring. But at that high of a level, you're still affecting your brain. There's no way to, with alcohol. Alcohol has a certain order of kinetics, zero kinetics, that you can't, at a certain level, everything becomes toxic. So I think that's what you're asking.